Okay, good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us this morning. And certainly, you know, now that you guys are not with me here in person, I have to get the technical stuff all worked out, and we had some technical difficulties. Just before we started, just made me think for a minute, and I try to think more than a minute, but it's made me think that so many times we, think something should happen in a certain way. So many times we anticipate someone coming or expecting something, and we get all frustrated if it's not happening right away, or it's not happening the way it's supposed to, or and you know what? Sometimes it's the technical difficulties. Sometimes someone got stuck in traffic. Sometimes and it just makes us realize, right, how we just have to take a step back, chill, relax, right, and say, you know what? Let's judge for the benefit of the doubt. Maybe it wasn't intentional. Maybe it wasn't, whatever it is, or the person didn't realize what they said, or what they did, or what they didn't do, or there were some circumstances that affected, right, something, and therefore that's why it didn't happen the way it happened. So for all those out there, right, again, I apologize, but there's certain things that are out of my hand, but thank God we got the sound working again. I mean, it was, you guys could hear me, but I couldn't hear you. So I was like, okay, maybe that'll be great. Interruption.
Thank you.
I'm just kidding. But I love hearing what you guys have to say, and I think it's very powerful, that you guys are involved in it. So I wanted to make sure that you guys were involved in that. Okay, so let's get cracking. So we are on page 156, day 49, 158. So there's you could all mute yourselves if you want, or just stay very, very quiet. I'm not going to mute you. It's very hard for you guys, for me to unmute you, and then you have to unmute and blah, blah, blah. All right. Thank you, Martha, for that. Right. So we're in this little group, and I just checked the following one. Right. And then there's another one. And, this idea, and we spoke about this, we elaborated on it a couple weeks ago. And I just want to introduce this again. This is an eyesore for me. Right. And just to introduce it again, that there is this relationship of Jewish courts and the secular courts. And just to reiterate, it is extremely important to follow the law of the land as long as it doesn't interfere with Jewish law. All right, the example we gave, which is easy, right? If there was a law that you had to eat pork, right, we weren't allowed to do that. There's a law that you can't do a Brit Milah, wouldn't be allowed to do that, right? But civil law or other laws that don't interrupt or are not in a contrary with Jewish law, right? We have to follow. Right, and that's in business, that's in civil, road, whatever it is, right? We have to follow those laws. Now, that being said, there's also side consequences that sometimes can happen, right, through civil law, right? Let's say you call the authorities, right? Which again, if you have to, you have to, right? But sometimes there could be consequences that might not be justified, right, for the scenario that you have. And if you could take care of it in-house, sometimes it's better, right? Because they don't know that they don't know who you are. There's a whole big system of how things work, right? And it's more of a general way. And listen, courts and laws have to be that way to a certain degree, because you can't look at each individual, right, by itself. Only God could, right? And that's the greatness of God's law, right? That God judges each one of us based on our merit, on who we are, right, on our actions, on the opportunities he gave us, on the lack of opportunity he gave us, right? It is a master way of judgment, right, that humans can't. And the Talmud speaks about this. Even Jewish courthouses, right, have to judge based on what they see in front of them and what happened. But at the same time, right, there is sometimes sometimes if what it would affect the individual, right? And also, as we spoke about the case last time, was that we are not familiar with all the Jewish laws. I mean, I know I'm not also in the, let's say, for example, in the laws of monetary law, right? Or other laws where there's so many intricate details. So we're not 100% sure if this is contrary to Jewish law or not, right? Or is this something that, even though it's not contrary to Jewish law, right? But, or, it is contrary, but it's not, it's something that, the concept of the law of the land. So there's a lot of intricate details, right? And therefore we spoke about the concept of speaking to a rabbi before you go ahead and be a whistleblower, right? Sort of just that extreme, right? So here's another example of where, right, there's this debate of what to do and what not to do, right, in a situation. And the reason why it's in the book of Lashon Hara, and I want to elaborate on this, is because when we say something that we're not allowed, that's Lashon Hara, right? And when we say something that we are allowed, that's not Lashon Hara, right? It's not magical. It's not, if you're allowed to say it, so then it's not prohibited, right? If you aren't allowed to say it, then it is prohibited. The same way, right? When, Judaism does have capital punishment, we do not exercise in that because we don't have the right Beis Din, and we're not in the Holy Land with the big Beis Din and all that stuff, right? But right, when at the times that they were, right? First of all, the Talmud says that a Beis Din, a courthouse that killed someone once in 70 years, right, is considered, not such a merciful Beis Din, right? So it was very hard. God made it extremely hard. It's not just like that, right? You actually have to see the action. You have to see what's going on. It has to be witnesses, and it's not, you can't do with DNA or things like that, right? It's extremely hard, but at the same time there is, right? Or lashes, right? Or financial penalties, or being incarcerated, right? Whatever it is, right? When you do that and it's legal and you're supposed to do that, so that's on the contrary, that's benefit to society, right? When it's being done in not the legal way, when it's being done, right, and it's harmful to other people, right? Then, right, that's illegal. It's not right. It's an aveira. It's a transgression. It's the same thing with our speech. It's the same thing with our speech. The same thing with everything that we do, right? With everything that we do, it's the same thing. That when we do something, right, that we're allowed to do, right, so then that's the right thing. So if we speak properly, if we act in the right way, right, when we do something that is not allowed, so then that's illegal. That's not the right thing, right? We can't do that, right? So in this scenario, that's why it is brought down in laws of Lashon Hara, that even though sometimes we think we're doing the right thing, right, or we're saying the right thing, it's not necessarily the right thing, right? So let's look at the example, and it is an extreme example, and I'm glad that they took this extreme example because I think the answer to this one is pretty straightforward, but they're bringing out a point, right? They're bringing out a point. And the example is like this. Your neighbor has a troubled son or a troubled daughter. We're 2021, right? Right? Daughters could also be trouble. Although he or she is too young for a driver's license, excuse me, he often takes his father's car out for a joyride. You've seen him driving recklessly around town, and you fear that he will cause serious damage or injuries. You've spoken to his parents, but they can't seem to get him under control. Right now, he's weaving in and out of traffic on the road you're on. Should you pull over and call the police on him? All right. So what do you guys think? Martha's saying her head yes.
Yes, absolutely. I've not looked at the answer, but
Good.
absolutely yes, because he's endangering himself. He's endangering the public. And
okay, good. So Jim is saying yes, very strong.
I say yes too.
Okay, Bonnie says yes. Cindy, what do you say? Okay, no answer from Cindy.
Sorry, I was not near my phone.
No,
Yes.
I often just want to talk to the parent first. I would want to give them some
But they said you
information.
So it says that he's spoken to his parents other times. Right now he hasn't, right? But his parents did not be able to get him under control. So are you saying you should call the parents first and say, hey, your kid is on highway San Jose or on Scott Mills and driving crazy, right? If you don't get your kid under control or call him or whatever it is, I might have to call the police. Or do you want to call the police or get before you call the police, or just go ahead and call the police? Is that what you're saying, Cindy?
Well, now that you say it, my personality, I wouldn't do anything. I would wait for the policeman to catch him or something. That's what
Well,
it
somebody
wouldn't be.
Just Cindy, it says right here that the person has already spoken to the parents, but they can't seem to get
Right,
it
that's what
under
I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. So
But
is
then
it
you're
my job?
Let me ask a question to the crowd, right? Let me ask a question to the crowd.
I would call the police.
Point, right? It's life and
It's life or death. Right?
true. It's life and death to a certain degree. But let's say there's no. It's at night. There's no actual
So
car
dangerous.
right now, right? And there's really no pedestrians on the road, right? And so yes, he is driving recklessly, and it's a dangerous thing, right? But at this moment, you don't see any immediate danger. And let's say you call the parents, and the kid has a cell phone, right? And tell the parents to get their kid under control, right? Or again, you never know if someone's going to walk out, someone's going to turn onto the road, or whatever it is.
Right.
Now, let me throw out another thing. You don't know who the person is, right? You're driving down the road, and this might happen all the time. You're driving down the road. Have you ever driven down the road and you see someone driving recklessly? Do you pull out your cell phone? And they were very careful to say you pull over, right? But probably most of us won't pull over. You just put on your speaker, right? Would you call the police and say, hey, I'm on, San Jose Route 13 in between and Bay Meadow, right? And there's this car driving recklessly.
Yes.
You would go ahead and do that if it's just a random person driving recklessly?
Yes.
Or is it because you know who the kid is and the child that is reckless? Bonnie, I know what you're saying, but let's just think for a second, right? Let's just dig deep inside of ourselves. And if that's how you are, that's great. But just dig deep into yourself. If you don't know who the person is, and now, since you do know who it is, they're a troubled child, right? You have a relationship, and therefore you feel more of a responsibility because you sort of know the kid, you've seen him, he's a troublemaker, and that's what's compelling you to make that phone call, right? Or is it just because if you see a random person driving wildly, you'll pick up the phone and call the police?
No, because I think in both cases, they could hurt somebody else as well as themselves.
That's true, 100%.
And Haz Shalom, the young person that I know,
can you what happens if you don't know them? Would you call?
No, it's still the same. Yes, for sure.
So you would call, you see someone driving wildly on 295, right? Or on San Jose or whatever it is, you make that phone call. Good. That's great. So if you would make that phone call, right? So then, 100%, it's no difference. You should make that phone call, right? And again, if it's driving wildly and it's imminent danger to people, and that's what they said, where there's a clear threat to others, the person may be reported to prevent harm. The question is when there isn't, right? There's no immediate danger. Now, you don't know what's going to be down the road. There is no. It's 3:00 in the morning, right? There's you're on Scott Mills or on San Jose, and there's no one on the road, 1 or 2 cars on the road, right? And he's driving very wild, but it's not like he doesn't have control over the car, right? But he's just swerving and drag, whatever it is, right? Would that scenario, because it's not immediate danger, and
No, it's not an immediate
danger.
danger, but if this is how he drives, he's ultimately going to be a danger to others and himself.
That's right. So then what you do is you call the parents and say, listen, you got to take this. I know you've spoken to your kid, but now your kid is out of control. And if you don't do something, I will call the police.
Okay, then I like
The
that.
police right
Okay.
away.
Okay, Rabbi,
No, I'm just playing devil advocate over here. Go ahead, Jim.
okay, I'm going to respectfully disagree. Unless you don't know what's coming down the road, you don't know who's crossing the street at 2 a.m. You don't know cars that are going to pull out. So I would challenge the theory or the idea that there's no immediate danger. There may not be any apparent immediate danger, but that people are out at all times of day or night.
Yeah.
And so
somebody could be having a baby and they're running to the hospital.
Yeah,
would-
great one, Kyle.
Okay, so if you see a random person driving wildly, you would also call. It's not because you know.
Yes.
And I'm bringing out a point because we do generally, people that we know, right? Like Cindy said before, and sometimes we just if we don't know the person, whatever, we're on a random place and we don't know, we just, whatever, it's not my, I just move on, right? But
No, you can't.
and I'm not saying what's right and wrong, right? I'm trying to bring out a point, right?
Right.
I'll home in on the point, and I think we've got a lot of different perspectives, and it's great. And I'm not disagreeing with any of them actually. But the point I'm trying to bring out is that we have to be consistent, right? A lot of times we, as individuals, we do this in the synagogue a lot, right? We do this, out in the street, or if we see
Yeah.
familiars in the shopping mall or whatever it is, right? When we see someone that we know, right, we feel a more sense of responsibility, which is good. We should, right? But at the same time, to do something dramatic, which I'm not saying is wrong. Dramatic doesn't mean it's wrong, right? Do something dramatic as calling the police or something else, right? If you do that for everybody, someone you know, someone you don't know, so then you're being consistent. If you won't do it for everybody, right? And really we have to dig deep inside of ourselves, right? And I'm not saying you won't or you wouldn't. You would or you wouldn't, right? I'm just saying we have to really reflect inside of ourselves. If we won't do it for a random person, right? Because whatever, I don't want to go out, whatever it is, I don't know who this person is, whatever it is. So then, right? Unless there's actually immediate danger, person has a gun to someone's head, or there's kids walking down the street and this person's driving wildly, or whatever it is, right? So then, right, we have to take a deeper breath and a deeper look inside of ourselves, right? Why am I calling the police now and I wouldn't call on a random person, right? And then that might be because of a responsibility. And if that's true, right, so then that's not coming from necessarily, it's coming from a good heart, but not necessarily from the right place, right? And then maybe it's better to call the parents again and say, hey, listen, I'm giving you a warning because I will call the police again because he is putting people in danger. And, it's better for you guys to take care of this than us, right? But
So did you just say, Rabbi, did you just say you'd call the parents and tell them that if I see this again, I'll call the police? I just
Yes.
missed that part. Okay.
right. So what I'm saying is that this is a gray area, and that's why I like this example. Actually, other times I've said I don't like their example so much, if you remember, and I actually like this example because I think this is a scenario, right, where and Cindy, you really brought this point out a little bit, right? That we don't always, and let's really think about it. I've seen wild drivers, right? We've seen wild drivers, right? That are in danger, not going a little too fast, but reckless, swerving, this and that, not having control of the car. That's a wild driver, right? You could have control of the car even if you go a little too fast. But people that, and saying that's right? But wild drivers is when it's reckless. You don't have control over the car, right? And we've sometimes seen it, right? Sometimes on the highway. I know I've actually slowed down a couple of times, right? Just to stay behind a person, right? Because let's let them go ahead. I don't need trouble, right? I've done that many times. I've San Jose, or even sometimes on the highway, I just slow down, right? Let them go ahead and then continue. So because, hey, till the cops get there, this, that, right? There's so many factors that go into our head, right? I'm not saying I did the right thing or not wrong thing, right? Was it, immediate danger? I don't know. Was there a crash down the road? I don't think so, right? But we have to reflect internally again. If there's danger or in what other scenario, yes, you have to call because make a difference. And the outer consequences, right? Sorry, there's immediate danger right now, right? And people's lives are on the line, right? But if not, so then we have to start taking account into other things, right? And that's sort of the idea. And again, the rule of thumb is that if it's the right thing, it's not lashon hara, right? If it's the wrong thing, it is lashon hara. So it's not easy, right? So then, if you're able to, right? So then, it's always good to try to contact the rabbi, right? Competent rabbi that could help you out, right? But sometimes we have to make our own decisions, right? Because we don't have that opportunity. It's so that we have to try to do the best we can, right? And that's why it's so important to study, right? That we are more knowledgeable to be able to make those decisions when we don't have opportunity, right? To contact an authority that can help us out. And it's not only in this; it's in everything. right? Sometimes you're eating somewhere, whatever it is, in kosher or laws of Shabbat or laws of the home or other laws, so many other laws, and we don't have the opportunity to contact a rabbi at that moment. We're in a place, it's Shabbat, whatever it is. There's many different factors. Sometimes we need to have to answer right now. That's why it's so important to learn, right? Or at least to learn to know what to ask, which is also so important. So what I'm trying to say is over here that I don't think that, there's one specific answer. Again, my thoughts, right? What I'm trying to say is that I think this example is bringing out a point, right? Is bringing out a point that we have to reflect on, right? That yes, there is consequences, right? That could happen, but those consequences, right, are not relevant when there's immediate danger. And yes, you have to do the right thing. At the same time, right, if it's not right away, and you're right, it could be consequent, whatever it is. But then in such a scenario, what do we do when we don't know the person, right? And then reflect.
Same thing.
Right. Again, I'm not saying what's right and wrong, right? I'm just trying to bring out a point, the rule, and then we have to misha'er and reflect, right? When we're in that situation, make that call, right? But of course, as parents, or if you've seen this and you haven't, definitely have to, really impress on the parents that they have to get their kid under control. And it's better for the parents themselves to sometimes either call the police or call, get them help, put them in a place or whatever it is. There's ways for the parents to get control. Keep the keys away from them, right? Yes, and unfortunately, we're living in a times where, their kids are, especially, teenagers once they reach a certain age, are very independent and sometimes don't like authority, right? And have ways of doing things. And reflect back when we were teenagers, right? Let's be honest, right? We're all good people, right? But we've all done things not necessarily endangering other people. I hope not. I don't think I have, right? But we've all done, silly things and stupid things, and we didn't think that we were either putting other people in danger or not necessarily to that extreme, but harming other people, whatever it is, right? So you have to put that all in perspective, right? Again, I'm not giving an answer. I'm giving a concept, right? Because there's no one answer for something like this, right? But the rule is, yes, if there's a danger, then that's right. You have to call the police. But at the same time, you really have to reflect and think, is there really a danger or not, right? What are the consequences, right? What's the situation, where we are, right? And that's just some of the things that we have to reflect on in this situation.
Can I just comment? I mean, I'm just thinking, let's just say the child was younger and this child had whatever, acted out a great deal and would possibly hit other children. He's not driving yet. So,
Right.
He's got whatever, feelings he's got inside and he's acting. So it's kind of like, and my heart goes out to the parents because they feel at a loss. But, it's kind of, obviously you're not going to call the police, but I mean, it's sort of like becomes progressive, doesn't it? That anger and then
Right.
dealing with it.
So the parents have to, and this is a side point, we're not doing a parenting class, but
I know.
No, but you bring out a good point, but it's something that we could all reflect on in situations that we are in, right? Either if we have influence over parents as grandparents, or we have other communal things that we're involved in, that there are people that are acting out or we don't have control, right? It's always important to recognize the difficulty, the behavior, of course, but it's always important also to recognize the difficulties that one has, right? And try to make themselves, better equipped to take care of a situation. So as parents, right, they have to recognize that they need help, right? Also, right, and making sure that they go to professionals and asking them how they could control their kid better, right? How they could educate their kids better, right? And if not for this kid, at least for the other kids that they have, right? To be able to train them younger, right? Wherever they're holding in life. And then also recognize that they need to get their kid help, right? And influence. Once they reach a certain age, you're right, the kids on their own, right? They're independent, and a lot of times they just go on their own. And if you try to use a stick, they'll never come back. So that's also part of parenting. Once it reaches, sometimes you have to use, authority, but at the same time, you have to, be kind and try to have that relationship, right? But at the same time, especially when the kids are younger, right? In the case you're talking about, right? We do have to recognize that sometimes we need help with parenting, and either get another authority in the community or a professional to help us out, send the kid to counseling, therapy. You go go to a professional to help you with parenting. That's also and that's something that you can have if you have, again, the authority or the relationship with the kid beforehand. Calling out someone on something that they're doing wrong, if you know that they're not going to listen to you, is also lashon hara, right? Because that's it says rebuke your friend, but make sure that there is no sin. And there's many different explanations of what that means. One of the explanations is that if you know they're not going to listen to you, right? Because you don't have that, you're just a stranger, you don't have the, whatever it is, you don't have the best relationship, or even if you have a good relationship, but they don't look at you that way, right? So then all you're doing is creating more of a fight because I'm not going to hear from you, right? So then we spend maybe going to the rabbi and speaking to him, and then speaking, right? And that's the different things that led up to where we are holding today, right? But yes, so many times, parents, coworkers, spouses, community people in synagogues or whatever it is, whatever organization you are in, don't even realize that they need help to be able to function with the other people to make sure that they're behaving properly. And they just blame whatever it is, right? Because they're themselves are not looking inside themselves, that they need help to be able to function and to take care of who they're responsible for. Good point, Bonnie. Any other comments or questions?
Rabbi,
Yes.
I have actually had to call the police, and it's somebody I had no clue who it was. And I was actually told by the police to do their work, and they never even showed up. So it became quite dangerous for myself. And the woman who was driving dangerously was in my neighborhood, and she actually ran from her car and left her 2 children in the back seat of her car.
Well, first of all, I'm so sorry that you're in that situation.
Right.
And you probably did the right thing. When you have to call the police, you have to call the police. That's what I'm saying. If they come or don't come, that's not your responsibility now, right? But if you have to call the police, you got to call the police, and no one's disagreeing with that. What we're just trying to do over here is that sometimes, right, if we're able to look at a broader stroke, and sometimes it's better not to, but as I said, you have to call the police. You have to call the police.
And it didn't matter whether I knew the people or not. This was the situation. And I had a neighbor who had the police called on them I was almost at the point where I almost called the police on my neighbor, but I found out from other neighbors that other people had called the police on him.
Right.
And he needed the
And
police being called.
I'm not advocating not to. That's not the point. That's clear, right? I'm a big component of calling the police when you need to, right? We have police in our front of each time all the time. We have a great relationship with the police, right? And and I'm a big advocate of the police force, right? What I'm just trying to bring out is that sometimes, right, we have to reflect, right, on the situation and way to take care of it, right, because of the outer consequences. If there isn't, we go ahead and call the police, right? But sometimes we just have to reflect internally, right, and try to figure out why we're doing that, or is there another way to take care of this? And as Bonnie pointed out, not every situation is the same. We gave an extreme situation with driving a car, which is a deadly weapon. Right?
She was driving a car, and she had 2 children in the back seat.
Right. I'm just saying, if someone that's just using their hands and hitting someone. Now, again, Using hands could also
That
be,
was my neighbor.
right. And that could also be deadly. It depends on the size of the person, depends who it's being hit, right? So there's always things that have to be reflected on. But again, just to reiterate, if we have to call the police, of course, we have to do that. Okay, let's move on to a more, I think, inspirational topic, right? We got to talk about everything, but I just want to home in on an idea that I saw, right? And I think it's a beautiful concept, something to reflect on.
Or it is.
Say that again.
No, I'm agreeing with you.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you. Right. So if you turn the page back for a minute, to page 157, right? On page 157, and we'll end with this idea, right? Is from Rabbi Chil Levinstein, right? He says like this. He says, "What is the benefit, right, that someone gains when they speak lashon hara, when they're not allowed to speak, right? When they're speaking lashon hara, which is the majority, unfortunately, not the majority, and I'm not going to be pessimistic, but unfortunately, we do it often, right? What do we gain? So let's just read through this for a second. Benefit does a person derive from speaking negative about someone else? Usually none, right, at all. He does not become more important by making someone else sound less important. He doesn't get smarter by pointing out someone else's foolishness. He doesn't gain talent by pointing out someone else's lack of talent. The only upshot of negative words is the cloud it casts over another person's reputation. It is a lose-lose, right? It's a lose-lose. For that reason, explains Rabbi Yechiel Cheskel Livingston, a Talmud, right? Doesn't speaking lashon hara as an evidence of a cruel person, right? He explains that many people believe they're far from such a hence being cruel, right? How many of us do we think that are actually cruel, right? But right, the Talmud calls someone that speaks lashon hara cruel, right? Because it has no purpose other than demeaning another person, which makes it the very definition of cruelty. Many people see lashon hara as something that is hard to control. However, when we think about it as an act of cruelty, right, our attitude will change. We have to admit that it's true lashon hara has no purpose but pain and damage. When we see it that way, we can see our ways, right, of feeling ourselves from the script. And so it's, again, we try to, part of the course of it is we're trying to restructure our attitude, our reflection, our ways of looking at what lashon hara is. Lashon hara is not just, oh, I spoke, I couldn't control what's happening. I like to gossip, I like to this, I like to that, right? Lashon hara is cruel. It's a cruelty, right? Because when you're harming someone else, meaning to say like this, when you're harming someone else and you gain from it, right, that's bad. Right? No one's saying that that's okay. Right? Well, I'm not saying that's okay. Right? It's bad and it's wrong. Right? But to be called cruel, that's not cruelty. Cruelty is when not necessarily in the Webster dictionary, right? But cruelty is, right, in definition of Judaism, is when ze lo nene, right, ze lo chaser, or ze chaser, when you do not gain and the other person loses, right? Ethics Our Father has I think it's in the 5th chapter, right? Speaks about this, right? That there's different categories where you gain and the other person gains, you gain and the other person loses, right? You don't gain and the other person loses. You don't gain, right? Right? Another person gains. There's many different, that's called a righteous person, but someone that you are harming, right? You don't gain, right? Anything. And they lose also, right? That's cruel, right? Because what you're doing it just for the act of hurting the other person. When you're gaining from it, right? Let's say you swindle someone out of $1 million. Terrible. You should go to jail, right? And you're gonna get punished up in heaven, and there's rules and laws behind it in Jewish courts and in secular courts. Terrible thing. But at the same time, right, what's probably the driving force of you swindling that person? Right? Not because you want to hurt that person so much, maybe a little bit, maybe you get a little benefit. Oh, I got that person. But what the driving force is, you want $1 million. Right? That's the driving force. Someone drops someone, or God forbid, even hurt someone physically. Right? But they want to get something from that person. They want to take over their territory. They want to do this. They want to do that. Right? Whatever it is, it's not saying it's right. It's wrong. But they're a lot of times they're part of why they're doing it also is because they want to get some kind of physical benefit. Right? Of course, that's not our point of life, it's spiritual, but they're still doing it because, so they're not doing it just to hurt the other person. When you're doing something just to hurt the other person, that's what we call cruelty. When you don't gain anything out of it and the other person loses, that's cruelty. And that's why the Talmud calls Lashon Hara cruel, right? Even though it's something that we know some of the finest people unfortunately do, right? Because it's hard, right? And we're not saying that the person's really a cruel person because it's a hard all have. But we have to start reflecting and realizing that it's a cruel act. It's important to make that difference. It's a cruel act and a cruel person. Someone does it all the time. The person's a gossiper, and that's how they live, right? And you know not to say anything around this person, or you have to stay away from them. Yes, that's a cruel person because the actions have defined this person now as a cruel person, right? But most of us are not like that. We here, we do this, we have a smooth here, we have that, right? But we're not actually defined by our Lashon Hara. So then we have to realize that the act of Lashon Hara is a cruel act. And when we realize that, we don't want to do things that are cruel, right? So then it'll help us to overcome our challenges and to make us reflect on our words and to change our attitude, right? And help us overcome this difficulty of Lashon Hara, right?
I do have a question, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
Now, this is growing our compassion. So I think 2 weeks ago, because I wasn't on last week, we talked about, and that really left an impact on me, when we talked about possibly our in-laws that might have a physical ailment and all the things we do for them. So all we have to do is like, okay, so they have a mental disability. So we have to have the same compassion that we would have. So here we have this person who's constantly, but you just said at the beginning of the shir, that if somebody's not going to hear us, we should not even say anything because that could cause even more problems. But so here's this person constantly speaking Lashon Hara. So to me, their lives must be so filled with pain to be doing that, because generally I perceive Lashon Hara in some respects, sometimes, if you put somebody else down, you yourself could possibly feel a bit better. But, there's multiple reasons why we involve ourselves in Lashon Hara, and I'm also party to that too. So, so it's kind of like, what do we do to help people who are so immersed in so much negativity? There's nothing we can do. One feels a little helpless.
Okay, so your question is a great question, right? And the point you're bringing out is a great point. And I'm gonna say two things. Number one, sometimes, yes, we have to hold up our hands and daven to Hashem and pray for that person and daven that Hashem puts on that person some spiritual, inspiration, a sprinkle of spirituality on that person. And no jokes, when we daven, when we pray, we do a mitzvah, it brings more spirituality into the world, right? There's a great rabbi who lived in the 1800s, right, Reb Chaim Volozhin, right? And he said many times, he told his students, so when you're learning here in Volozhin, right, which is Lithuania, he says some Jew in France, right, in Germany, whatever it is getting a sprinkle of spirituality and giving him the opportunity to change, right? Because the more we bring spirituality into the world through the mitzvahs that we do and through the learning that we do and through overcoming our challenges, it doesn't only benefit us, it benefits the whole world and brings more of a spirituality into the world, right? So yes, sometimes the only thing we could do is daven for that person, right? And try to be a good role model for that person. But if we say something to that person, or it's just going to backfire, it's just going to create more fights, and it's just, there's no hope. Right. With me speaking to that person right now, right? There's always hope for someone, but for me to speak to that person right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Sometimes unfortunate situation. Other times, as we said, trying to find someone that this person will listen to, right? and or respects, right? Or adheres to a rabbi, a colleague, a spouse, right? Most times it's dangerous to get spouses involved, right? So that's not always the best thing, but sometimes spouses are good, right? A parent, even sometimes if it's someone older, a child, right? Whatever it is, right? Someone, if you could find someone that they respect, someone that they would listen to, right? So then, yes, you could go ahead and say, listen, I don't know if you're aware, but maybe they live out of town. Say, listen, listen, so he or she has this thing. They're just always speaking negative about, always. It's getting, too much. And I was wondering if maybe you could talk to them, maybe speak to them, maybe, learn with them, listen hard, whatever it is, right? But otherwise, sometimes we have to dive in for other people.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you everybody for joining us. I'm going to turn off the recording.